Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Positive Post in Conversation. I'm Zazie Todd, and I'm joined, as always, by my friend and co-host, Christy Benson. Hey, Christy, how are you?
I have been punched in the face by my giant dog, so I look a little rough, but I promise I'm fine.
Oh, dear.
It was
I'm
a
glad you're
it was a
fine.
happy moment that he was over happy and but I'm
It
good.
was an ecstatic reunion.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, we're very excited because today we're joined by Grant Hayter-Menzies. Hi, Grant, how are you?
Hello, I'm fine, thanks. You?
Good. Grant Hayter-Menzies is a biographer and historian specializing in the lives of extraordinary and unsung heroes of the past, notably the role of animals in times of war. He's the author of 13 books, including Muggins, The Life and Afterlife of a Canadian Canine War Hero, Woo, The Monkey Who Inspired Emily Carr, Dorothy Brooke and the Fight to Save Cairo's Last War Horses, and From Stray Dog to World War One Hero, the Paris Terrier who joined the First Division. But today we're here to talk about his latest book, which is Freddie, the Rescue Dog Who Rescued Me, which is a wonderful read and a wonderful cover, a beautiful likeness of Freddie on the cover there as well. So this is a really lovely book about your life with Freddie and how Freddie helped you through some hard times. But can we start with how Freddie came into your life?
Well, Freddie came into our lives in September 2010. My ex-husband and I had been looking for another dog to adopt. We'd lost our dog Jessie at 19, 2 years earlier, and we felt like we were at the point where we could do this. That evening before we went to see Freddie at the BCS in Victoria, um, uh, Les called me over to the computer. He was looking at the BCS website, and there was this adorable but terrified looking little fox-like dog, um, and his name was Frederick. And Les said, "Why don't we go look at him tomorrow?" And I said, "He won't be there. He's too cute. He looks so in need of care and love. I mean, somebody's going to snap him up." But we went because we had some chores to do downtown. And we got there, and as I tell in the book, we couldn't find him. We went around and around, and of course, the sad thing about making the rounds of the shelter is you have to look at all the other doggies that are there that you aren't there to see, and they're all looking at you thinking, are you the one?" Um, and I was so emotionally upset by this by that time. I said, "Let's just go." Les said, "No, I'm going to ask what the kennel attendant." She said, "Oh, Freddie's here." So we went into the back, and there he was. He was the most terrified little dog I've ever seen in my life. And um, this, and I, of course, fell in love with him the minute I held him. He was shaking like a leaf. We brought him home. He stood in a corner, shaking without looking at us, um, and this set up a problem between us because I'm very much like my late mother. I nurse grudges against people who hurt animals or hurt children or anybody who can't fight back. And I was doing a lot of things, violent things in my mind to the people who had made this little dog into such he was didn't even know he was a dog. He came out of a puppy mill. He wasn't socialized. He didn't know how to do any of the things a normal dog, in my experience, knows how to do. He didn't even know what a toy was. And as we got to the point where um, he was learning how to live without fear, we then had to deal with the problem between us, which was he was afraid of me. I, who loved him and was, very, very touchy feely, he didn't want to be near me. He always ran over to my husband. So we brought in a finally called a wonderful animal therapist named Janet Parker, uh, who came in, and she said, he's afraid of you because you're holding on to a lot of stuff that he doesn't understand, and you're making some demands on him that he doesn't understand. Um, you first of all need to drop that stuff, but also you need to build trust with him. And that way to do that is to feed him by hand on the floor for as long as it takes. And it took about 3 months. And I describe what happened in the book when Freddie made the decision that he could trust me, and after that we were fast friends through thick and thin, literally. So yeah, um, uh, he showed me that he could make his own decisions, and that he was willing to trust despite what humans had done to him to make him the way he was. And I just thought that was amazing and moving as well.
Yeah, very, very special dog whose trust you had to earn, even though he was supposedly yours to begin with. Yes.
Yeah, like what gives? I'm the one that does everything for you. But yeah, I was carrying a lot of stuff, and I talked to my mother about it. Luckily, she was still living then, and she also said, just let him be. He'll come to you. Um, and she was right, as mothers are.
So before Freddie, you used to write biographies of people, and I was super interested as I sort of read your book to see the types of people who you focused on. I thought that was really interesting. Lots of women.
Yes.
How did Freddie career towards writing biographies of animals?
Well, because of course, I had a suffragette great grandmother, and I was surrounded by the most amazing women all of my upbringing. Um, I had a mother who I've just described, who was an incredible, compassionate woman. She battled bipolar disorder, and other issues that shortened her life. But she was, if you need an army to lead, give it to my mother, because she'll win the battle. She just couldn't handle everyday life. And um, I wanted to write about women who had made a difference, who in their fields, and also women who were perceived as having gotten where they were through their husbands. And I thought, no, because I saw my grandmothers and my mother and aunts all kind of dancing in this two-step to make their husbands feel like they were actually the ones that did things, when it was the women who actually ran the show. So that's what led me to write women's biography. But it was watching Freddie make this transformation of choosing to live without fear, of choosing to learn, and navigating human all the perils of an animal living with human beings. That's all I can say. And I thought, well, the best and this most moving and oftentimes tragic example of that is animals conscripted to war, and human wars that no animal ever caused. And because of him, I started researching Rags, the World War I dog, rescued off the streets of Paris, became a dispatch dog for the American First Division, possibly the only one. They didn't have dispatch dogs, the Americans. And from there, it just went from there, and exploring how animals deal with, as I've said, all the complexities of having to live in a human controlled setting, including Emily Carr's monkey Wu, who a lot of fairy tales have been written about, but did not have the fairy tale life. So I wanted to do this, and I dedicated these books to Freddie, not only because he was my original inspiration, but because he would sit beside my desk, and he would spend a lot of his time with me while I was working, and keep me company in the lonely business of writing. So
I think we writers all need that. But
yes.
it was really in the last year of his life that Freddie showed his real bravery. He was incredibly brave. So can you tell us a bit about that? I know that was a difficult year for him and for you.
It was, excuse me, not least because he was around 13 or 14. We never really knew his age. He had a heart murmur. It was actually a heart murmur that took us to his vet in before um, the cancer is diagnosed. That led to an echocardiogram, and then that led to or sonar, and that led to discovering that he had hemangiosarcoma on his spleen, which is possibly the worst place you can have it, since it's a vascular cancer and it spreads through the body through the vascular system, and the spleen is a vascular organ. So we were basically told he may only have a few weeks. If even if we do manage to successfully get his spleen out at his age and with his heart murmur, he might not survive the surgery. And so we
We
sorry,
lost your
sorry.
picture.
There we
There
go.
you
I'm
go.
back. So yes, we made the decision to go ahead because he so loved living. From the moment from all those years, it was his love of life that was so inspiring to me, and his interest in the world, despite having been born in a box and brought up in a completely a situation where he wasn't socialized or had any contact with real world. And so it's like, should we do this or should we do that? Well, I felt, and my partner Rudy felt, that we should give him a chance to live. So we proceeded with surgery. He actually aced that just fine. The surgeon said, he might not make it even now, but do you want to try chemotherapy? We did that. He aced chemotherapy. He had his oncologist on the mainland where we had to go for his treatments, in astonishment, because she had never seen a dog this old and with so many other issues just sail through. And things were looking like they would probably be okay. The heart issue got worse, as one would expect. And then that almost a year from the day he was diagnosed with hemangiosarcoma, we'd taken him into his vet here in Sydney, and he was determined he had lymphoma. He still wanted to live. He was always playing. He was not giving up, and I thought, if he isn't going to give up, I'm not going to give up on him. So we went ahead with chemotherapy. But the one happy thing about his passing, which happened in October 2021, is that cancer did not get him. It was his heart. His heart was too it just he couldn't handle anymore. And it probably would have happened that way anyway, so we were told. So he lived over a year after a hemangiosarcoma diagnosis, which is almost unheard of.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I
So it was after all of that, and then his passing, part of the grief processing for me was to reread the diary I'd kept over that year. And what came from that was, I might be able to put this into a book that might help other people who are going through similar situation with their dogs or cats or any animal.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that. And I know what hemangiosarcoma is like, because that's what we lost Bodger to. And Bodger lasted about 5.5 months after the surgery,
Yeah.
which in itself was amazing. And I bet
Yes.
that was amazing. So for Freddie to manage a whole year is just incredible, I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I thought, I'd be writing something about this. I thought I'd be writing a memoir of how he had made it through. He had survived the worst. And in fact, he did. He did survive the worst. It's just his heart was, um, what we guess is that his early trauma um, was it had caused some damage. The place where he came from, the terror he lived in. Like I say, I've never seen a dog such as shaking and scared of the wind blowing on his fur. It was just, and you can see why I was angry at the people who did this to him. But uh, look what he did. He bloomed. He came out of it and became a happy, healthy, inspiring little dog. He even chased a burglar out of our house. So,
And I think there's sort of a sense, or maybe it's like a coming, now is the time when we can start to talk about grieving our pets in a way that I don't think we could really maybe 20 years ago. Like
yeah.
I think it's nice to have, like you're saying, other people's words to be like, I'm not alone. I think a lot of people feel kind of alone, like they're
Mhm.
like, I'm really grieving. And it's almost, well, you're going to come back to work tomorrow or something, like I think there just isn't necessarily an acceptance.
You're right. You're right. And it's something that I wanted to deal with in the book as well, because I was brought up to treat animals seriously, to take them seriously. That they're not like stuffed animals that move around. They're not toys. They're sentient beings. It was some of my father's last words were about the love of animals in our family. And he said, it, it's important to treat them as beings. They are one of the family. Um, and it's important to be allowed to grieve, as my parents let us do. They said, we had a little place in our back garden where our pets were buried. My father would make a little box. My mother would sew a little cushion and put it inside, and then that's where the pet would be put. We were encouraged to weep, and it was taken very seriously. And it's okay to do that if people could just let themselves do it. It's also honoring the animal. One of the things I did, um, not just to write the book, but because I had the means to do so, I had a special portrait urn made of Freddie, by an urn ceramist in New York State, who made special urns with like a portrait of the animal on top. And she used photographs of Freddie, but she said, "How would you like me to? What do you want me to show him asleep?" And I said, "I'd like him to be shown as he was in his last moments, which was he was terribly ill, and we walked into the ICU. Um, he was brought out of the oxygen cage, and they held the oxygen to his nose, um, and he stood up for us. Did he think we were coming to take him home? But he stood up for us in anticipation of, further life. And with us, he loved us. And I wanted him to be shown looking like that, standing up expectantly. And she did a wonderful job. It's a beautiful thing. And I think if you can do that, or, have pictures around, or if you can look at them, if you can have them around, there's so many things that you can do. And it's this a book that I'm going to talk about in a second by E.B. Bartels. She describes some of the ways that people have found to commemorate their pets who've passed on. Happy ways. It's not funereal at all. It's about, because they don't think of death that way. Animals, they live in the now. They live in the moment of, like, right now. And so um, yeah.
I've always thought that's sort of maybe not a blessing, but something that I can, I feel like I can learn from animals, especially around the time when we're saying goodbye.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. How to say goodbye with joy.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what Freddie did. I'll never forget it.
So you used to write, you've written mostly stories about other people and other animals, and this is very much a story about yourself. So how did it feel to sort of, I don't know, flay yourself open or make a decision to talk about yourself in this way? It's very personal.
Awful. But I knew I had there was no other way to there's no other way to do it. I'm used to being the stage manager who puts the life on the stage and pulls the curtain and does all the lighting and all of that. I'm not used to being the person on the stage of a particular book. So, but there was no other way to do it, particularly as I was using so many diary entries uh, from the diary I kept of that year, of Freddie's year. And I basically had to, uh, try to tell the story through my own experience, my own eyes, but stay out of the way as much as I could. But there were so many stories about animals from my family, um, so many memories from childhood. There were a lot of beloved animals in my family, and uh, I wanted to do justice to them as well. They all mattered, and uh, so yeah, it was. And I'm thinking of doing another one actually. Our Nico, our new adopted pup, who also came out of a puppy mill. He has all the characteristics of a child that's been bullied. Um, and I was that bullied child in elementary school and up until high school. In fact, that's what kind of made me into a writer. I kind of went off the beaten path of my peers and chose a different kind of life, not an easy one, but it made me into what I wanted to be. And I'm thinking of a memoir of dealing with this little dog coming out of his shell, um, uh, and kind of the way I did as a child, through animals, a great deal of the time. So I might do it again, but it's just it's going to take some thought. But I had to write this. I had to do it for him.
Mhm. So you mentioned Nico. Tell us about Nico. And then also, I'd like to know what you would say to someone who is thinking about adopting a fearful rescue dog.
So Nico also came out of a puppy mill hoarding situation. He's about two. He's a miniature poodle mixed with a couple of other like Havanese and Bichon, I think, but he's mostly poodle. Um, he uh, uh, he was if it I keep saying to folks that ask about Nico, we couldn't have dealt with his issues without having the previous experience of helping Freddie. Because of, I mean, had anyone else had this dog handed to them, um, they might have handed him back in a few days because he was unsocialized. He was, part of this is because he came from on a long journey. He's young. He had been through a lot of experiences, but it was very complicated for about a good month or two. And it would not have been possible had we not learned what we learned from Freddie. What I would say to people, yes, when you go um, to a shelter to look at an animal to adopt, whether it's a dog, cat, rat, whatever it is, um, there's going to be the one that's hiding in the corner and that is afraid and isn't running around and jumping and playing like the others. That was Freddie. And I would suggest it's not easy, it's not for everybody, but I would suggest give that little animal a chance, because I picked the little scared dog in the corner and he changed my life, changed my career, um, gave me a reason for living at a very low time. Um, and that's that's what they do. And we changed his life immeasurably. So if you can handle it, give it a chance. Give the little scared, frightened animal um, a chance for a new life, because it can change yours.
Yeah, and I think, I started my book WAG with a sentence about how every dog changes your life to a greater or lesser degree, and I never imagined that Ghost would change mine so much, but I think it's quite wonderful the way in which dogs sometimes can really bring about a huge change in your life. But
They
I
do.
mean, yeah, so it's
And
worth
and
considering
and
those dogs if you can.
cats and horses and whatever it is, birds, whatever it is that you want to help, they're there to help you as well.
Yeah.
As I was reading your book, I liked, like, just stepping sort of a little bit back. I liked how the stories that were both your stories and your family stories, and then, other stories, they seem to be like a scaffolding upon which your own, like the main theme of the book about you and Freddie and the changes in your life at that time were sort of hooked on this scaffolding. And I couldn't help but wonder, was that, like, did that just flow organically, or did you do a lot of, like, well, this is an allegory for that, or I guess just like your process interests me. How much was it, on purpose, or how much did the story really, all of those stories kind of directed what parts of your story you put in?
Unlike every other thing I've written, which is full of footnotes and endless bibliography and all the other, everything vetted and double vetted, this just came out of me. I didn't have to put footnotes. I did have there are some, but it didn't have to account for anything I said, and that's the beauty of memoirs, because they come out of you. That's what you thought of what happened. I've read hundreds of memoirs in my research for some of the biographies I've written. Uh, the problem was choosing which ones to include, because there are so many. There are so many. I wanted to include the memory of my grandmother Cooley welcoming our pony when he walked into the house, when our pony Dickens just happened to walk into the living room, and my grandmother Cooley greeted him and said, "Hello, my dear, how are you?" And my mother was so afraid. My grandmother was such a proper Southern lady. My mother was, trying to head me off, saying, "Get him out of here, get him." And my grandmother told me later, she said, "Your mother need not have worried." She said, she she said, I'm a Christian woman, but if there's anything to reincarnation, I hope I come back as a horse, so to run free over green fields forever." And she wrote about some of her childhood pets. She was a very fine writer. Um, and there were so many stories that I heard about dogs, and mostly dogs in the family, dogs that had rescued children from drowning, and lots of photographs. I inherited hundreds of photographs, and many of them include the dogs. Um, and I think that too is why I was brought up to take them seriously. They're a member of the family. They're in the photographs. They're with us through thick and thin. And you don't give them up. You make it work. And I'm lucky that I was able to make things work with Freddie when the rug was pulled out from under me, under us both. So yeah, it was basically trying to choose which stories. Otherwise, it would have been like 3 volumes. So.
And kind of following on from that, because Christy and I like to ask writers for writing advice. We know we have actually a lot of budding authors who listen to this show now, but also we interact with a lot of people who are writers or want to be writers. So what advice would you give to a writer? Because you've written about so many different subjects and you've pulled out so many different stories. What's your advice about finding a good story?
I like to follow the structure that my late godfather William Luce, the playwright, followed in his one-woman plays, which are all based on historic women: Emily Dickinson, Karen Blixen, and Charlotte Bronte. He found the crisis point in the life, and that's where you start the play. And he said, you find the crisis point in the person's life. Everyone wants to see how it's going to turn out. And this has always fascinated me, again, because of the situation I grew up in with a mother who had good days and bad days. I was fascinated by the way this woman, who could spend days on end in a dark room, the door closed, could then emerge and do heroic things, um, and could solve huge problems, and could just take charge. And then she was everyday life destroyed her. She couldn't handle that. And I try to find the same thing. I look for the crisis point in the life, and then I work backward to tell how the person reached that point, to be able to, person or the animal, to be able to handle what happened to them in that crisis. Because I really celebrate lives that I write about. There are some people that write biographies to tear somebody down or to dig up the dirt. I don't see the point of that. I write because I'm inspired by a person or an animal, and because I want to be a better person. And animals are always showing us ways we can do that if we would pay attention. So that's what I do. I find the thing that the rest of the tale hangs on, which is usually the person is faced with some sometimes life or death choice, or something happens, the bottom drops out of their life, and they're not prepared for it, but they handle it and they survive. What led to this? And that can be applied to animals. A lot of that's guesswork. They don't leave diaries, they don't write letters, but based on animal behaviors, it's possible to, at least I've found it possible to write a life of an animal.
Great advice. Thank you very much. And we're gonna move on in a second, but thank you again for coming to talk to us about Freddie. I want to
Of
hold the
course.
cover up again for people to see. Freddie, the rescue dog who rescued me. It's available from all good bookstores, if people want to get a copy. And so now we're going to move on to the section where we talk about other books that we've been reading. And I'm going to ask you to start first, Grant, please, and share with us what you've been reading at the moment.
So I've been rereading, because it is such a wonderful book, E.B. Bartles, Good Grief. Full title: Good Grief: Unloving Pets Here and Hereafter. Um, One of the jacket endorsements is a wonderful, unusual, and healing book. Read this book to affirm that love never dies and you are not alone. It's a book that I wish I could have written, and I've told EB this. Jealous of her. It's about how people deal with how people deal in a positive way with the passing, the death of a pet. How the author herself dealt with it in her childhood, and people that she talked to, or that she read about and researched. And I've just been, a lot of what I've been saying, I think anybody listening to this with interest in animals, it knows this already. I mean, it's important to commemorate them. We weren't the kind of family that, when a fish died, it didn't get flushed down the toilet. I know there were a friend of mine when I was a child, her mother did that. And it was so upsetting. And I thought, my mother would never do that. Like they were put in our little graveyard, Um, what this book also helps you see is it's a very sane thing to commemorate and celebrate a pet's or an animal companion's place in your life when they've passed on. It's not crazy. It's not in the realm of eccentricity or any of that silliness. It actually is very sane and very normal. And I think if we could do that, we might actually have we might have people treating animals better than they do. As we've seen lately, we've seen animals recently in the news that have been badly treated in war zones, and it just never seems to stop. And I think once they're taken seriously and their lives are seen to matter, that hopefully we will move a little closer to the that wonderful place where animals are, where they live in the present moment. But I would recommend this book to anyone who's interested in, and it's not sad. It's not sad. It's very happy. It's very funny. It's charming. I mean, EB she's wise beyond her years, and my
Thank you.
recommendation.
Yeah, so that was Good Grief by E.B. Bartels. And that is a book that has kind of been on my radar for quite a while, and I think I should read it at some point, and I haven't got to it yet. So thank you for mentioning it, and that kind of will bring it bring it further up my list. And I have to say, I think in your own way with Freddie, you've done what you can to help people understand more about the grief of losing a pet and what you can learn from the animals in your life as well. So
Thank
I
you.
think you've done that in your own way with Freddie in a marvelous way. So
Thank
thank you. Christy, what are you reading at the moment?
I'm I'm listening to I'm not sure if this ever works.
I can see the cover, I can't read it.
Okay. It's called A Song of Achilles, The Song of Achilles, a novel by Madeline Miller. And I'm listening to the audiobook version. I'm only a few hours in, so I'm like just about halfway. But it's essentially like a rewriting of the Iliad, which is totally not something, I'm not even that familiar with the Iliad. That's not like something that's grabbed my interest ever, but I saw it in my my audiobook service, and I thought I would give it a shot. It's written like you're in the mythological universe, and you have to suspend disbelief. So there's like a centaur who teaches these two young men how to fight and how to make a living in the forest, and and it's all just presented very, and maybe this is, I don't read a lot of fantasy books, so this is all kind of surprising to me that it's just presented like it's real and you kind of believe it. So you're just like, oh yeah, the centaur just trotted away. And even though it's in the back of my head, I'm a little bit like, so like we're mammals and we're tetrapods, but he has 6 limbs, and what part of his body is like where are his organs going? And but so far, I mean, it's fascinating. I think it gives you a really interesting eye into what I assume Greece may have been like, or people expected the gods' lives were like in Greece, at this time. And it's just, I think the thing that sort of drew me to it is that the author makes it very clear that she thinks that Achilles and Patroclus were in love, and so it's like a love story about these two men. I didn't know the end, but then partway in, I was like, I sort of feel like this is going to be a sad story. So I Googled the end. I'm not sure I'll finish it now because I'm not in a space where I can read a lot of sad stories, and it definitely, in case this is a spoiler alert, the Iliad isn't happy.
No, it's not.
I don't think that's a spoiler either.
No, I actually loved reading the Iliad when I was in my teens, and I actually slept with it under my pillow at night, and I had horrible dreams of smoke and warfare and fires and clanking of yeah. But it's beautiful. I love how it begins with the wine dark seas. I always think of that when I see dark, sort of beautiful ocean water.
But I love the prose. So I think the writing is very beautiful and very engaging. So I'm like drawn in, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
So far it's been very very, like I say, it's not my typical type of books. I'm surprised how much I like it. That's my book.
Excellent. Thank you. Sounds like a good read. And so my choice at the moment, I took this away with me, Rose Adams, by Margie Taylor, and I took this away with me when I traveled recently, and I finished it after I got back, and it's really nice. It makes a change to read a novel that has an older woman as the main character. And so Rose is a librarian. And we all know that librarians can solve everything, of course. But she has a lot of things going on with her family. So she notices when she's going to work or running errands that there's a boy who lived in her family for a short time when he was young. And she notices him begging in the street. So she's thinking, is he homeless? What's going on there? Should she do something about this? And other things are happening. So her daughter was finishing a PhD, is really close to finishing the PhD and is about to get married. And all of a sudden announces she's coming home. She's not getting married. She's not going to finish the PhD. So there's a lot going on there. She doesn't want to talk about it either. So there's a lot happening in her life. And then her son has a girlfriend who she doesn't really like, but maybe she should like. So she's got to sort all of these things out and solve all these problems. And there's something going on with her husband too, and all these family issues happening that kind of comes to a crisis point. And what is she going to do? And I think she's a very Vancouver character. So if you know people in Vancouver, you will think you recognize mannerisms and things from people in Vancouver. And she's of a certain age, so it also does a really nice job of capturing some of the ways in which maybe older people don't quite understand the ways in which younger people tell them things have changed or should change, but it's done in a really good way. It's done really nicely. And she's a very warm, personable character. So it was a really nice read. It was really interesting to see what she was going to do about all these things and how she was going to solve it all. And it's quite funny as well. It's quite witty. I like books that are witty, so that was a nice read too. So
Sounds
yeah,
lovely.
so that's what I've been reading. And that brings us to the end of this episode. So thank you, Grant, for coming to talk to us about Freddie,
Thank
the
you.
rescue dog who rescued me,
Thank you.
which is a really beautifully written book. And having read some of your other books, it was actually very nice to read a book in which you are featured. You're the main character. And to learn more about Freddie, especially having seen so many pictures of Freddie over the years on social media and so on. So that was a really special read.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. If people want to know more about you, where can they go? To your website and your social media?
Yeah, they can. I'm on Instagram and X, I guess is what Twitter's called now. And I'm on I have a website as well. So if you just Google Grant Hayter-Menzies, it'll come up.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
thank you to
Thank you
everybody
both.
who's been watching or listening today. Please hit the subscribe button to make sure that you never miss a show, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.